right on the heels of an emotional battle that had a captain show a whole new side of himself as he let his rarely combative lieutenant take charge, we have an emotional battle that has a captain show a whole new side of himself as he lets his rarely combative lieutenant take charge. And it's somehow just as beautiful the second time, and actually much different than it seems since, let's be honest, Mayuri and Shunsui are two very, very different people. So let's talk about how Kubo kind of cooked the same meal twice, but made them feel like they came from very different chefs. In the middle of our heroes attacking the new Soul King's palace, we shift our attention to another part of the battlefield, to the larger force of Soul Reapers that head captain Shunsui was leading. This group is the largest contingent of forces as far as numbers, and it was the largest contingent we had until they found themselves in the crosshairs of Sternritter X, Liege, Barrow. Yeah, we're losing people fast. Real fast. Barrow's entrance into this part of the battle is pretty scary as he's up on his perch picking off characters one by one with his sniping skills, forcing everyone to run, and poor Hisagi can never catch a break. Not ever. But yeah, that was one of the moments where this environment really felt like a war zone in the more modern world sense, like running through abandoned streets trying to avoid a sniper. I don't know if it's just because my great uncle was actually killed by a sniper in Italy during World War II or what, but this felt so raw. It's as scary and sudden as it should be, with Barrow gunning down our Soul Reapers left and right until Shunsui decides to stay behind to take him on. And I loved the way that he put himself on the spot to find where the sniper was and then made his way up there. It not only showed him defending his troops like the leader he is, but how he got there itself was the typical casual badassness that Shunsui usually brings to the story. And I loved that the others were concerned about him staying behind, but then it was reasoned that even Ukitake would have respected this decision, and I just liked that there was this moment of hesitance until his potential sacrifice was accepted. And Shinji even went a step further by bringing up the fact that it's what a head captain should do, so they all carry on without Shunsui. Everyone but his lieutenant, Nanao, and more on her in a bit. Shunsui versus Liege Barrow is a matchup that I wasn't really expecting, but maybe I should have, considering how often Shunsui ends up fighting guys with guns. It happens, like, all the time. I would have loved for Stark to be alive and have come back with Nell and Grimjow so he could team up with Shunsui against Barrow. That would have been so fun and would have fulfilled their friendship that never was, but so easily could have been. But alas, what we got instead is Shunsui taking on yet another gunman and trying his best to play games with him. I loved all the stuff with Shadows because, like I've mentioned before, I love that kind of power set in general, so no surprise, just great stuff, and I love Shunsui doing the sensible thing in trying to get close quarters against a character that's a sniper. And Barrow even mentions games that the Quincy play, and it made me want to see more of what the Vandenreich's lives have been like the last 1,000 years. What was it like being in hiding in the literal shadows for so long? Were they playing games in there, in the Shadow Realm, or was Barrow talking about life before they were all in hiding? I'm not sure, but I love the dichotomy between them, with Barrow being so serious, and Shunsui always acting so casual about everything. Emphasis on acting. But as we get to know Liege Barrow more and get a better sense of his character, he was very easy to hate, which is sometimes exactly what I need for an antagonist. His whole holier-than-thou, self-righteous messenger of God thing is pretty annoying and grinds my personal gears, but it's a great juxtaposition against someone like Shunsui, who doesn't act that way at all, despite his own authority and his own power. They also share kind of a similar position in a broad sense, where Barrow apparently was the first Sternritter to be given a shrift, so he sees himself as being closest to Yuabaha, closest to God, while Shunsui was one of Yamamoto's earliest students, and in a way was the closest to the head captain before taking on the position himself. Side note, but there was a translation error in the Viz manga copy I was reading saying that Barrow was the last person to get a shrift, while the anime was saying he was the first. So I was a little thrown off for a second, but yeah, he's the first one to receive one. Despite that, he doesn't seem particularly valued by Yuabaha on a personal level. Like, I don't think we've even seen them really speak to each other, but most of the Quincy don't seem to hold any significance to Yuabaha really, except arguably Haschwald. So it's funny hearing how deluded Liege Baro is when it comes to his own importance to Yuabaha, considering how we've seen the rest of the Von den Reich be so easily discarded, but that probably just makes Baro even more delusional. Like, yeah, look, it wasn't me. It couldn't be me. He would never throw me away, when most likely he absolutely could throw him away. I don't think Yuabaha really views any of his underlings with any real respect, no matter what they believe. His track record with his subordinates hasn't exactly been great. And once Liege Baro opens his eye, his X-axis powers get even crazier. The X-axis was already one of the most hacks abilities, with how it can automatically pierce anything. But now, things can't even pierce through Liege Baro either. He gets like Kitty Pryde, Vision, Martian Manhunter, Danny Phantom intangibility, so he can't be harmed. He can hit anything and everything, but nothing can hit him. That's insanity. You might as well just throw your arms up and quit at that point. Like, what am I supposed to do? He's gonna hit me no matter what, and nothing I can do can hurt him. It's insane. And his transformation was pretty unexpected, especially with how drastically different it looked. Von den Reich Quincy's have always had this angelic motif to their designs, with their halos and wings in general, but this goes a noticeable step farther as Baro kind of turns into something more similar to how angels are biblically described, especially with like the multiple wings and the kind of more abstract figure he takes on, and his power is undeniable. And that kind of power with that kind of aim is very, very scary, and he really starts to put Shunsui in a bind. Again, Shunsui can't hit him, he can't not get hit. It's crazy. And for one of the first times, we kind of really see Shunsui's casualness, his nonchalant attitude dissipate as he really starts to realize, like, oh, this is really bad. This is really serious. And he's put into a position where he realizes he might finally have to actually use his Bankai, which is very exciting. And we see the spirit of Shunsui's Zanpakuto, the spirit taking on the form of a beautiful woman cradling him in her arms, was very spot on for Shunsui. I initially imagined she also used to have two eyes, and her also missing one was carrying over what happened to him, like it just reflected what happened to his exterior also happened inside of him. But then she mentioned him ending up looking like her, and I thought that was kind of fascinating how he ended up reflecting his spirit rather than the other way around, almost like it was destiny or something. Their relationship is kind of fascinating because there's an intimacy here that we don't typically see in this way between a user and their Zanpakuto, but it just works for Shunsui. Much like with other women in his life, he seems to both respect her and also kind of aggravate her. And because he has two swords, he also seems to have another spirit with him as well, who takes on the appearance of a younger woman that doesn't seem nearly as attached to him. More on that later, because now we need to really get into Shunsui's Bankai. One of my favorite things about this Bankai was the hype around it being activated, where everyone across the whole battlefield was like trembling at the sheer power of it, and I wonder what it would have been like if people saw it or got too close. I guess they would have been swept up in the narrative as well, but yeah, that build-up felt earned after we were left contemplating for so long, and being the new head captain, there's a lot to live up to on that front too. There's a certain aura and grandeur that Shunsui should be able to stir up, and it didn't disappoint. It felt properly big. It was one of the unknown Bankai I was most looking forward to seeing because of how it was teased before. One of the only little clues we had about it was that it might be dangerous for anybody nearby, including allies, so he wouldn't use it in a populated area or if he was too close to his teammates. He almost used it back in the Irankar arc and was like, oh no, too many people around. And I was like, I've actually brought up my theory for what I thought it could be a few times in the past, where I was considering it might be like this radius that turns the world around him into like a living board game or something that everyone would have to be playing, where what happened in the game would actually happen in reality. But nope, it's very, very different from that, since the emphasis isn't really on the game thing. No, it turns out when it comes to Shunsui, it's all about the word play. Whereas his Shikai was about games one would play, his Bankai is literally about a play, like a theatrical performance, and this one seems to be a tragedy, and I love this so much. It's like he turns reality into this stage, and you're suddenly in the performance. And as we go through the acts of the story, the performance affects his opponent in a manner similar to what's happening to the star of the play, which is just crazy. And it was really beautiful looking, and I loved the whole look. I think I preferred it in the manga, but I did like what the anime did with it as well. Shikai represents kind of the outward appearance of someone, how they present themselves, while Bankai is much more who they really are beneath that. And I've always kind of kept that in the back of my mind, but I don't think it's ever been exemplified as well as here. On the surface, Shunsui is this easygoing, playful kind of man that doesn't seem to take things seriously. But as we've gotten to see more of him and learn more about him, it's clear that there's so much more depth than what he shows. And even the shadow part of his Shikai sometimes feels like a hint towards that as well. There's a weight and a sadness to him that he doesn't usually present, and that seems to be reflected in his Bankai, going for something much deeper and darker than you might expect. He pulls Liege Baro into this play, he suffers all these consequences of what's happening in this tragic story. In the final act of the play, Shunsui cuts off Stern Ritter X's head. So yeah, Shunsui's Bankai was worth the wait, and I love that it wasn't anything I anticipated, while still being so true to who Shunsui is deep down. It was just a great representation of this character, and it becomes even better as we learn more about him in the next little bit here, but I thought that was just visually so interesting, conceptually fascinating, loved it so much, and for a second it's like, wow, that's over, cool, Shunsui won. But no. Liege Baro survived getting his head chopped off because these royal guards are so far proving to be very difficult to kill. It's surprising and intimidating in the same way Pernita's regenerative abilities were, where Mayuri had to get really creative to destroy him, where nothing conventional seems to work. And a part of me was a little sad that Shunsui's Bankai didn't finish the job after its big reveal, but honestly, looking back at the series, Bankai often aren't enough when they're introduced. It's not the most effective when you look back. As far as stats for everyone, yeah, it's not over, and Liege Baro's only getting worse. After living through a straight-up beheading, Baro's new form becomes like this nightmarish owl monster that reminded me of that creepy library owl from Avatar: The Last Airbender. The way the eyes blinked in the anime helped give continued emphasis to Liege Baro's vision being key to his character as well. It reminds me a little of what Kubo did with Tozen after he gained literal vision but lost sight of reality. Liege Baro probably has the best eyesight in the series, but just because he can see well doesn't mean he can see clearly. He's blinded by his arrogance, his self-importance, his power. Like, he really thinks he's this unstoppable godly figure. And it may turn out that that's not exactly the case. Can I just say that I love that this whole fight is essentially a game of hide and seek on a number of levels. It starts off kind of that way with people trying to run away from the sniper that's trying to seek them out and trying to hide, while Shunsui has to find the sniper that's shooting at them, and then of course it becomes that as Shunsui's on the run and hiding in the shadows. But it goes even deeper than that as we find there are hidden secrets that need to be found as well, things that people might not even know they were searching for, or have never had the desire to search for until now, as we will soon see. With Shunsui severely wounded and having shot his shot with his Bankai, it really shifts to his Lieutenant Nanao, who has always been one of the most background of background Soul Reaper officers for me up until this point, except for maybe Ukatake's officers. I don't think I could pick them out in a crowd. Like Nemu, Nanao hasn't ever really been allowed to get in the action until now, but she didn't have the intrigue of Nemu's artificial creation going for her. No, outside of her resemblance to Lisa, and revealing that she's an expert in creating barriers earlier in this arc, Nanao was usually very, very much off to the side, always just being around to help support her nonchalant captain. She felt like Shunsui's handler more than anything else. She would wake him up from his naps, she would help him with creating the vibes that he wanted, she would smack him in the head when he needed it. She was always there for him as a necessary occasional kick in the butt to a guy that typically seemed so relaxed and unbothered. She was always there to support him, and it turns out that Shunsui needed some support, and more importantly, he needed his family, whatever or whoever was left of it. So let's get into this backstory we learn about in these chapters, because this threw me for a loop. So bear with me, I just need to lay it all out. Shunsui had an older brother, and his older brother married a member of the Issei clan, an apparently all-female clan that was supposedly cursed, where any man that married into the clan would die soon after. So from what I understand, Shunsui's sister-in-law married his brother and left the clan to try to avoid that curse, but it ended up happening to him anyway. So Shunsui's brother died pretty young, pretty tragically. So then his sister-in-law was sent back to the Issei clan, where she realized that this curse might be caused by the clan's ceremonial Zanpakuto. So then she tried to get rid of the sword by giving it to Shunsui for safekeeping and getting it away from her clan. But because she did that, she was executed by Central 46 for misplacing an ancient artifact. Did I get that right? I hope I did. But a very important part of all that I haven't said, is that Shunsui's brother and his sister-in-law had a child together, who turns out to be Nanao. So this whole time, throughout the whole series, Shunsui was Nanao's uncle. After the death of Nanao's parents, he decided to watch over her, but more from a distance, and brought her into his squad once she became a Soul Reaper, even though she was only good at Kido and never had a Zanpakuto of her own. Nanao knew, because she overheard as a child, that her mother had given up the ceremonial sword to someone, and she realized it was Shunsui, but she still didn't know the exact family connection. She only learned it here, and this whole thing was crazy. I wasn't expecting them to be related. Hell, I thought she was going to be related to Lisa. But yeah, Shunsui looked out for her because he's the embodiment of a cool uncle without ever sharing that with her. He was her captain, she was his lieutenant. They had a bond, but he never revealed that it went deeper than that. Until now. That had to be pretty eye-opening for her and a relief for him to finally be able to talk about as he shared his story of loss. Of a shared loss that he has with her that she never knew that her parents meant so much to him. But I loved that she almost had the pieces to figure it out thanks to Shunsui's choice of clothing, because it turns out the flowery pink kimono that he wears originally belonged to Nanao's mother, and the pinwheels in his hair each belonged to his brother and his sister-in-law. And I'm having trouble putting into words just how much I love that for his character. From the very first time I saw him, there's always been something so inherently intriguing about Shunsui, and it truly does start with the most surface level thing of all, his appearance. Kubo obviously is very good with character designs, like we've discussed plenty of times, and in the case of the 13 captains, they're all distinctive in their own ways, but when they were all standing together that first time, Shunsui was one of the ones that stood out more immediately than the others. Sure, he wasn't as utterly weird looking as a certain scientist, and he wasn't a giant man with a basket over his head, like Komamura. Where is Komamura, by the way? I thought Ibo was carrying him around to take a bite out of Yuabaha, but nothing. Still waiting. But yeah, there's a blatant reason that Shunsui always stands out in group shots of the 13 captains, and a lot of it comes down to the color palette between Shunsui and his peers. In a series that focuses so heavily on black and white, a pink kimono really pops, and it immediately struck a chord early on when I didn't know the captains that well, and I wasn't familiar with them, and couldn't think of them all off the top of my head. I always recalled Shunsui pretty immediately, and that impression really did come down to the very specific and very unique attire. It set him apart. It gave us a clue toward his laid-back personality, how he didn't just fall in line with everyone else. It made him stand out. But now we know it has another purpose and a whole lot of meaning to our new head captain. Shunsui almost literally wears his heart on his sleeve. In this case, he memorializes his losses. The clothes he wears are part of the tapestry of his life, one that he almost always carries on his shoulders at all times. It's absolutely beautiful, and I love this kind of thing where the story of someone's past is right there in plain view, where a quirk can turn out to be so incredibly important. Love it. I love it because of what it says about the man that wears those items. Shunsui, beneath all of his nonchalant attitude, beneath all of the bright colors and the drinking and the games, is one of the most tragic characters in the series. He lost his older brother, he lost his sister-in-law when she was put to death for giving away a sacred treasure that she gave to him, something that he obviously now feels pretty guilty for. He also lost his mentor later, and then he had to take on all of his duties as head captain while in the middle of a war. He may have even lost his best friend in Ukitake, and if he is gone, it would have been during Shunsui's tenure as leader when he had to be away while Ukitake made his big sacrifice. He's lost so many things he loves and taken on things he's never asked for. Yes, he's lost a lot, but more than that, because of those losses, he had pressures and responsibilities put on him that he never wanted, that he never asked for, that he never expected, but took on anyway. Shunsui's naturally kind of a lazy guy, but isn't allowed to really partake in chilling out too long because of what's been thrust onto him. Just more and more emotional baggage and duties to deal with, and through that becomes even stronger. And he makes it look effortless a lot of the time. He smirks and sighs and yawns and parties his way through the series most of the time, but there's so much tragedy that he's shrugging off on the outside and only now really letting himself show. And now he's wounded in battle with his niece there by his side, finally sharing the full truth with her. And it's that truth that gives Nanao a chance to really stand up and fight, because the Zanpakuto her mother gave Shunsui, the one that was passed down through the Issei clan, rightfully belongs to Nanao, and is probably the reason that she was never able to create a Zanpakuto. It's always been notable that Shunsui carried 2 Zanpakuto, while most everyone else always had the one. Considering lore and what Zanpakuto really are, it seems like someone should only have one. It was even pointed out by Agamotto that having your Zanpakuto manifested as 2 blades is a rare thing. The only other person we've seen dual-wielding Zanpakuto, I think, happens to be Shunsui's best buddy Ukitake, which is interesting in itself. It not only helps show their bromance in a visual way, but knowing what we know now, in Ukitake's case, I think it might be because of the presence that Mimihagi had inside of him, sharing his body. So maybe that's why Ukitake had to. That'd be a nice subtle hint, but Shunsui doesn't share his inner self with a god hand like Ukitake does. And when Ukitake's Zanpakuto is sealed, it's just 1 sword, while Shunsui's is 2. And it turns out the reason Shunsui has 2 is because the Zanpakuto split itself to hide Nanao's own Zanpakuto. So Shunsui really only has 1 sword, right? That's what I got from this. The second was also his spirit, but just a part of it. I guess technically he has 2 now, but it all originated from 1? Like back in the day, before all that, I assume Shunsui had 1 before he hid the sword. But yeah, he hid it within his own Zanpakuto. So the ancient sword that Central 46 was willing to kill over has been hidden in plain sight the whole time, and again, I love stuff like that. There's an interesting parallel here as well between Shunsui and Mayuri that's much deeper than my joke at the beginning of the video, and maybe part of why they decided to weave these fights between each other in the anime episodes. Mayuri, in his attempts to create a true soul, kind of accidentally became a father as a result, while Shunsui became a father figure to some of the only family he had left. Mayuri brought something into this world, while Shunsui lost everything, and they both ended up with quote-unquote daughters that saved their lives in these battles. And Nanao draws her sword, and for the first time, really takes up arms as a Soul Reaper. It's easily one of the most unique Zanpakuto in the series, because it hardly looks like one at all. It doesn't have a blade, it's just this paddle of wood with a few little mirrors on it, but according to the old legends, when they used it to perform rituals, it can reflect the power of the divine, which is conveniently exactly what we need right now. Is it a bit too convenient that this is the perfect tool to be able to really do some damage to Liege Baro? Yeah, I think it's pretty convenient. But this whole sequence is such great growth for Nanao and Shunsui that I can overlook just how serendipitous this whole thing is. You know what? It's just fate. This was fated to happen. I can deal with a tiny bit of contrivance if it gives me Nanao experiencing real combat for the first time, pushing through the struggle and the pain, understanding what it's like to be in a fight as Shunsui reappears behind her to give her support, and her realizing that she supported him just as much as he supported her, and they're standing there like it's the uncle-niece Kamehameha as Baro is blinded by the reflection of her bladeless sword, once again arrogantly thinking he's got this one, that he sees everything, only for Nanao to send his power right back into him, which he never saw coming, slicing him apart. It was so good. I got a lot of chills, especially in the anime. It was beautiful as the secrets were brought to light, and the truth was so bright that it cut Baro down. These two, captain and lieutenant, uncle and niece, family who have been there for each other after losing the people that originally connected them, defeated their enemy. And it's beautiful that they've stuck together even when the whole truth wasn't known, and now they're stronger than ever. I loved Shunsui revealing his history and how it affected Nanao, and I loved that this revelation gave her the power that she needed to win, and honored what came before, that honored the past and the people they've lost. It was so good. It was just another beautiful development that's been subtly built up throughout the series, and I loved seeing both these characters shine, but shine even brighter while standing together, finding their hidden power. I loved it so much, and it felt like the absolute perfect climax for both of these people in the war. And I'm glad that these two have each other, and I'm sure Shunsui is a really cool uncle. Well, that's it for now, guys. Thanks so much for watching, as always. We're going to be finally jumping into friend stuff next video, since the anime reached that part for me. And we'll be talking about that, and that's yet another tragic story. So, yeah, I'll see you guys next time to talk about Bazby and Hashvalt. If you want to see more, we have hours and hours of manga read-alongs, anime reactions, Q&As, lots of stuff. So, yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Take care.